You're listening to The Jackie Daily Show. You can find me online, JackieDaily.com. That's Jackie, no E, daily like every day. On Twitter at Jackie Daily Host, Instagram, and Facebook. Okay, I've been waiting for this interview all week. I'm so excited to have two of my favorite people in the Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex in the room. And I never exaggerate. I don't speak in hyperbole. If I say they're two of my favorite people, I really mean it. To my side here to the left, maybe you're right, is Sheriff Bill Wayburn from Tarrant County, which you know is Fort Worth, and then Sheriff Jim Skinner from Collin County, which is the county directly north of Dallas. And I'm told one of the fastest growing counties in America. So it's quite a job. So let me take their bios one at a time because they're so impressive. I don't want to miss it. So Sheriff Wayburn, veteran of the U.S. Air Force, 1984 became the youngest police chief in the state of Texas. 31 years at that job, worked with the state legislature on the open carry law, which actually Texas is kind of late coming to that law, but it wasn't Sheriff Wayburn's fault. He did what he could. He has a master's degree in conflict resolution, a graduate of the FBI National Academy, a black belt in Taekwondo, and creator of the Human Trafficking Unit in Tarrant County Sheriff's Office. He is married to Laura Wayburn, and they have 10 children, 8 of which have been adopted. And he and his wife are passionate advocates for the fatherless, love his heart, which is why he's one of my favorite people. And Sheriff Skinner, 30-year law enforcement veteran, trial attorney, former prosecutor, oversees 550 personnel. He's a subject matter expert, having served on the President's Commission on Law Enforcement and Administration of Criminal Justice. He's the chair of the Legislative Committee of the Sheriff's Association of Texas. He has formed with 7 other sheriffs the North Texas Criminal Interdiction Unit, arresting over 130 traffickers, seizing tons of illegal drugs, military-style weapons, $1.5 million in bulk cash, and loads of human cargo. So quite the job. And I did not know until I read the bio that Sheriff Skinner also was a SWAT team leader. And he's been stationed in Southeast Asia, New Mexico, and the Middle East. 3 very equivalent places, right? Southeast Asia, New Mexico, Middle East. And he's married to Ellen, who is a superwoman, a friend, a lawyer, one of those total package types of ladies. So welcome both of you to the show.
It's great to be here with you, Jackie.
Good to have you here.
Tell you a little trivia. Actually, Sheriff Wayburn and myself were the same age. We have the same birthday. We were in the same branch in the military. We had the same commander, and we were both elected as sheriffs on the same day.
There you go.
Amazing. Same stars for your birth and your coming into your professional station. Yeah. So that's amazing. I had no idea. Not surprised. Okay, so there's so much to cover here, but what I'd like to do is just jump right into the heart of starting with why. You know, why do we care about the topics we're going to cover? Specifically, we're going to hit hard on fentanyl and what it's doing to the American population. And so I was speaking to Sheriff Skinner actually last week at a dinner, and he pulled me aside. He said, we have to talk on your show and get the word out because people have no idea what is happening with fentanyl. I mean, everyone knows what fentanyl is. We know there's a massive drug problem, opioid problem, open border, but probably most of us think if I don't choose to do drugs, I'm out of harm's way. It's not my problem. It's not in my neighborhood. It's not in my house. Sheriff Skinner said the world has changed and we need to talk about the new reality with fentanyl, which we experience here in Texas because we're a border state and for other reasons. So Sheriff Skinner, I'll let you start. Tell us about the analogy or lead us to the analogy of, are you going to be the American that gets on the jet today?
Well, that's
Explain
right,
what
Jackie.
I mean by that.
Well, times have changed. We work in a job now where, look, let me just start by telling you, first of all, I don't know how much more I can take meeting parents who have children that have died from a fentanyl poisoning when they had absolutely no idea that the pill that they were taking would end their life. we live in a society where the casual transference of prescription medication is accepted, and everybody does it. And maybe there was the time when that was okay and it wouldn't harm you. But that day has come and it has gone. The same with recreational use of drugs. The overdoses that are happening, the deaths that are occurring in the United States now, these are not junkies. These are not drug addicted people that are addicts, that use too much heroin and dropping dead. What's going on is the Mexican cartels are using these precursors that come in from China. They're creating these fentanyl tablets that are coming into the United States, and they're creating knockoff prescription medications that look like Adderall, Percocet, OxyContin, on and on. And they flood our market with them with the intent to addict Americans. This is exactly what's going on. So I want you to think about that 16-year-old girl who has a sore back. And so from a friend, she takes a Percocet. And she goes home, and that night she goes to bed, she takes that Percocet, and her parents find her dead in the morning.
And this is a real story, right? These are true stories where you personally have been present at the body bag for these teenagers who lost their lives totally unsuspecting.
Yeah, Bill and I talked to a mother together. We met this woman who told us a story about her 19-year-old daughter at college who took an Adderall from another friend. She took the Adderall, and she, instead of staying up that night to study, of course, it killed her. The fentanyl poisoning killed her. Imagine a fully loaded Boeing 757 with crew and passengers that crashes, killing everyone on board once a day, every day, 365 days a year. That's how many people are dying from drug overdoses in this country, and half of them are fentanyl.
And so that's what I was saying by, are you going to get on the jet today? 300 and some odd Americans, at least, that we know about, are going to get on that jet today, and it's going to crash, and their lives are over. Are you going to get on that jet today? And it can be in your house, whether you think you're in a drug area or have a family member with a drug problem or not. So it was very powerful for me because I knew nothing about this. I come from a hometown, which I'm told is fifth in drug-related violent crime behind Detroit. So I know a lot about opioid addiction. I've lost 1 in 10 of my high school classmates to opioids so far. And those are people who do have a problem. They have a daily problem, right? It's an all the time thing until finally the Narcan doesn't revive them in time or whatever. And that's the situation there. But this is kind of a different situation that I was not familiar with. So going over to Sheriff Wayburn, you're over in Tarrant County. Explain, what is an interdiction unit? And are you part of Sheriff Skinner's interdiction unit? You're one of the 7 sheriffs, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So explain what that is and why you created it.
Well, one is I want you to know that Jim Skinner was the brainchild of that. And that was his. It was
a team effort, brother.
It was his idea, and we joined hands together, and we marched down the road. Had to get some legislative change so that we made sure that we were in clear on some things. But this unit is specialized trained officers and deputies that are out there on the road that are looking for bad guys that are carrying drugs and people and coming through our communities. And we know that the Dallas-Fort Worth is a huge corridor.
Yeah.
That we're making contact, dealing with cartel members that have decision-making power. And we're dealing with, obviously, just the routine mule, too. But a lot of these people, as the border comes up to us, we become the border.
Yeah.
And you got I-35, the busiest road in America. Then you got I-20, and then the offshoots of that, like US 75 and 287. And we know that drugs are moving up and down those roads because, as you said earlier, we've taken tons of it off the street. So these guys are highly trained. They're out there. They're watching. We're cooperating together. We're teaming together to share intelligence and go after them.
And we have an agreement where we dress all of our deputies alike. If you saw one of my deputies in Tarrant County, you would never know it. When
right.
Bill's deputies in my county, our interdiction deputies are all dressed the same, and they operate cars that look identical without a county name on it. Just the other day, one of Bill's deputies assisted one of my deputies in a high-speed pursuit that went for 30 miles through Collin County. And when they got this bad guy stopped, he had 25 kilos of meth on him and a pistol.
Yeah.
So These are bad characters, and these deputies are out here making a difference.
These are some of the most dangerous people on the continent.
Yes, they are.
And your people working under you are the ones, you're the tip of the spear. I mean, you are the people. It's not the U.S. military who's fighting this invasion of cartels and drugs. It's you all, which is pretty amazing. So let me ask, before we move to the next thing on this issue where we move illegal substances, I've always been told by friends who work in intelligence, wherever you see illegal things being moved, there are also people being moved right along with it. Same people, same corridors. I have friends in Washington who were pretty high up in the last administration, smart people. One of them, not from Texas, said to me on the down low, like, hey, you know what? Ivanka's really into this human trafficking stuff, and we're all not sure about it. Like, is this really a deal, or are these just women who are choosing to go into the sex trade and make some money, or what is this? Okay, I said, sit down. Please let me explain. And I'm not the tip of the spear, but I knew some stories like that the average trafficked victim, Dallas Morning News says, is 13 years old. That is a $600 million business, they estimate, but who really knows? So whichever one of you wants to jump in here, can you explain what you see in your job on a regular basis with trafficking for a person who would ask that question as a policymaker?
Well, we started our human trafficking unit in 17 because we knew that they were out there. But one is the average in those days was 14. That was our experience as we rescued these victims and found out how long they'd been in human trafficking. And they come from our broken homes. They come from out of our aged out foster program, and they have been doing that. And they get, they start off with a lot of times being used in pornography, and then it leads to sex trafficking, and it becomes a way of life to them. That is their security, their norm, but they're being traded by a trafficker that is selling them, true human trafficking, and they just give them a little bit of hope that they are going to get money and this, that, and the other, but it becomes very, very normal for them. So that a lot of times when they interact with us, they're not going to say a word. They're not going. You would think, well, they just want to do this, but that is not true. They're intimidated. They're under fear, and their life expectancy is not long, and they want to make sure that their trafficker is pleased with what they're doing.
Yeah, let me give you an example. We talked about our North Texas Sheriff's Criminal Interdiction Unit. We had a deputy late one night out on 287 that stopped a vehicle northbound, and inside the vehicle, they located a 14-year-old female child. And the deputy separated her from the two men that were in the car, and they began to talk to her, and she couldn't tell them the name of the individuals that were driving the car. So, of course, the deputy, suspicious, began to talk to these fellas. As it turns out, she ended up being a 14-year-old runaway from San Antonio 2 weeks before she left home, run away. And these guys were taking her to Colorado to sell her. So it ended up being a great case and a great rescue. And from time to time, we run across these situations and we find this. You got to understand that, a lot of this starts south of the border. A lot of these women from South and Central America that are trying to make their way into the United States, they're captured by the cartels. They're put in one central location. They're gang raped. They're drug addicted. Then they smuggle them across the border and they make them work as prostitutes, servicing up to 30 Johns a day. Sheriff Mark Lamb out in Pinal County, Arizona, he tells of a situation where they had stopped a woman. Actually, they rescued her. She was coming across the desert, and she had been abandoned by the coyotes that were bringing her across. And they found a bottle of pills in her backpack, and they couldn't figure out what they were. And ends up, she told them they were morning after pills. Yeah. Because she knew that when she started this journey, she was going to be raped multiple times, coming across the border.
And this open border, which is not really the topic today, but I mean, this is what brings all of this as the fallout. Two things. Number one, what is most shocking to me is the demand for a trafficked person. This happens because people pay for it.
That's right.
It would not happen. It would stop tomorrow if people did not pay for it. And so, and it's not just the, it's also the powerful who are paying for it in Dallas, Texas. I heard that the average life expectancy if you're trafficked is 7 years. I don't know why. What are they dying of? Is it drug overdoses? Is it abuse? Is it homicide? What is it?
All the above.
Okay.
All the above.
All
Jack.
the above.
Okay.
And you're right about that demand, if I may speak to that,
Yeah.
is that this day and age is that we have so many people that, quite frankly, get steeped off in pornography, whether they're in the church pulpit or they're lawyers, they're cops, they come from all walks of life. And as we have looked at that, is these people live in this fantasy world, and then they get to the point where they're buying the fantasy. And they think that these people want to play a role in their fantasy. So there's a lot of things interrupting things. And as we talk about fentanyl, or as I got in trouble for, fentanyl, but is we need family members, we need wives invading their husbands' spaces. Quite frankly, we need their coworkers, their ministers. We've got to invade these children's Facebooks and social media. We've got to get into those quarters to see what they're talking about, because as Jim so well articulated, they think they're taking this harmless drug that'll keep them up for a few hours to study, and 10 minutes later they're dead.
Yeah.
And there's no margin for error. There's no going along. And 40% of the fentanyl that we're seizing, by the way, is a lethal dose.
Well, so, going back to how to protect ourselves from the fentanyl issue, because, historically, my answer would have been, don't start with the first decision to do drugs, right? Don't start. That's where it all goes wrong, is we create, once the customer's created, man, they're hooked and they're in. But here, we're talking about a different problem where maybe you didn't choose to do opioids or heroin or like hard drugs. All you chose to do was take a Adderall from your friend, a Percocet from your friend. Okay, so my question is, how do these tainted drugs enter the stream of commerce? Are people getting tainted drugs from a pharmacy chain, or are these things you order online or made at home?
So think about how ingenious this is from the cartel standpoint. This is not people sticking a needle in their arm or between their toes. They're making Mexican oxys, the M30 pills, these blue fentanyl pills with the M on one side and 30 on the other. That's one category of them. And then what they're doing now is they're making this an absolutely perfect knockoff prescription pills. And they're flooding those into the market. And I'm going to let Bill talk about, the motivation behind the cartel and why they want to addict everyone, because, his folks have actually interviewed people that have addressed that issue. But the whole landscape has changed when you talk about drugs. Even the casual drug user, this guy that goes out and meets his buddies, and every couple months they go out and they drink and have a great time and they do a line of coke. Well, okay, you're ended up in a body bag before the night is over, because the cocaine you're snorting is laced with fentanyl.
This is not the 1980s. This is not a 1980s movie where, freebasing cocaine on a table is cool at a party. This is, you're rolling the dice.
The statistics
every time.
The statistics say, so we've had over 100,000 overdose deaths. Almost half of those have been from fatal fentanyl poisonings. The statistics say that number may double in the next 24 months. It may triple, right?
But again, you're getting these tainted drugs online. You're getting them because, in other words, people are listening right now thinking, if I go to CVS and get my script, do I need to be worried about this?
My advice to anybody is, don't take any medication whatsoever unless it's prescribed by your doctor and it comes from a pharmacy in the United States, not through the mail. Okay, certainly not on the black market, because if you do and you live, you're just simply cheating death.
You might get on the jet today.
You might get on the jet today.
Yeah.
That's right.
And a lot of this is on the dark web. and it's out there in the community, and it's just like anything else that have happened is somebody gives some pills to somebody, and they give them to somebody else, and they give them to somebody else, and it's just hand to hand to hand. And finally, the 16-year-old says, hey, I've got an Adderall from my mom's cabinet, or from my friend that he said he got it from his mother, and here you go. And so I think it's as casual as that in a lot of our research. And right now we've got the cartel pushing up so much drugs, and they don't care. We've interviewed them in our jail. We've interviewed cartel people, identified, confirmed cartel member, when we said, you're killing your clients. And they said, it's okay to kill the American. It's okay. We're good with that. And we'll addict some, others that we will kill, and that's okay. They don't care. They're connected with the Venezuela movements. They are absolutely weaponizing these drugs. It is, make no question about it, they are here to hurt us.
It's a business paradigm also. They want to addict as many people as they can, and there's going to be collateral damage. And if you think for 2 seconds they care whether or not they kill your child, I got another thing coming for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's super scary. And so, the only way you can protect yourself, to reiterate the kind of takeaway point here, is you're going to get your drugs prescribed to you by your doctor in a pharmacy in the United States, no exceptions.
That's
Anything else, you don't know what you're getting, because apparently the cartels target not just marijuana, cocaine, opioids, whatever. We're talking about common, everyday prescription drugs. I know kids who, when I was in college, would make stuff in the chemistry lab at college, right? You can make ecstasy, or you can make this kind of thing. And people pass that stuff around. And my grandmother taught me when I was this tall, don't even put an Advil in your body. Like, people think she's extreme, but that was good advice, because
great advice.
You just don't know what you're getting. So that's, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so when these things are made, when fentanyl is put together and made, by some guy with a mask and oxygen that he's breathing with a big stick and a pot down in Mexico stirring and making this stuff before it goes into these pill presses, there's
no chemistry degree behind that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but one of those pills is, may have 90% in it. Another pill may have 11.5% in it. That's another thing too, is that the potency of fentanyl that we've seen coming back from the lab over the course of the last 3 years. I mean, it's gone from 7.5% up to 11.5% typically is what we see. And then there's a very small percentage where you'll run into it north of that. And some of this stuff, even 90%. You take one of those pills, you are done.
Yeah, it's over. And you told me at our dinner, remind me again of how many deaths what percentage death increase last year in Collin County.
So this is a great example. In Collin County, over the course of the last 36 months, we've had a 485% increase in the number of fentanyl fatal poisonings. So if it's that in Collin County, imagine across the nation. And listen, I'll tell you, I sit on the board of directors for the National Sheriff's Association, and I'm the chair of the Government Affairs Committee for NSA. And so I talk to sheriffs across the nation constantly. I talked to a sheriff just the other day who told me that when they respond to an overdose now, they automatically assume that it's fentanyl.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's how frequent it is, especially in the smaller counties.
Yeah. Well, in my hometown, I mean, what I'm hearing is that people, before they shoot up, and this would be, standard hard drugs, but before they shoot up, they call the ambulance in case it's fentanyl-laced, and they don't know it.
They don't know.
And so the ambulance is running out with an Narcan. Imagine this. And anyway, so what's crossing my mind, rightly or wrongly, I think rightly, is this: if it's up 487% in Collin County, and if that's representative of the country, then what percentage of excess deaths that we talk about with COVID-19 in the year 2020 and 2021 actually weren't COVID, but were fentanyl? I mean, that's an extreme 480% in 36 months?
36 months.
That's extreme. That's a lot of Americans who lost their lives.
Absolutely.
And this is not a COVID problem. Now, that we do have a COVID problem, something like 20% of the people crossing the southern border are positive for COVID. No one cares about that. But anyway, I can hear now the people who will give me some blowback on even bringing that up. But this is important. We need to know what's killing Americans and be accurate about that and not overcorrect for one problem or undercorrect for another, because your whole reason for really pushing me to do this interview, because I do oil and gas normally. I don't do a lot of crime, but is that people are dying and no one knows about this.
No one's doing anything.
And tell us about that.
Why isn't our government doing anything to be constantly pushing public service announcements, warning Americans that your teenagers who, I'm sorry, but it's just the truth, will casually take a prescription pill from another person and take it for whatever reason. I mean, we've grown up in a culture that way. No one's doing anything to warn this. Why don't we turn on the television at 7:30 at night and see commercials informing and warning Americans about this problem?
Well, and I don't want you to get too political, so I'm not going to put you on this spot because you guys have to work with the feds and with the governor and with everybody else. That's part of your job, is to have good rapport and establish good relationships. But if you could speak to people above you who have more resources and more discretion, what would be your recommendations?
We got to shut the border. I mean, the border is the issue right now, and we've got to shut the border.
I agree.
And I think we can reduce it. I think that should be our number one cry, is we've got to stop it there. The cartel's having a field day. They're great entrepreneurs. They are making money hand over fist with drugs and people. And right now, while the Ukraine war is going on, there's no spotlight at all on the border. And they only want, DPS they've been a great partner, and they've done a great job, in my opinion, down there, but they don't have all the resources.
Well, to Governor Abbott's credit, he's been banging the drum on fentanyl for quite some time here in Texas. But look, here's the truth. This is the border issue for me. It's not about immigration.
Right.
It's about this tsunami of death that's flowing across the river into America.
Right. Okay, I said I wouldn't say this, but I'll say it anyway. And you guys can tell me if I'm getting too hot, because I can actually edit this out of this interview if it's too hot. As I'm listening, what I'm hearing, especially when someone says it's okay to kill an American, and we know there are Marxists south of the border who view us as enemies, frankly. Right. I've heard there are 155 nationalities that have crossed that border. I mean, I'm asking myself, are our enemies just emptying their prisons and putting them down in Mexico and letting them run north? Are armed militias, trained militias, terrorist cells being imported to Mexico to run across the border? We don't know who's coming across that border, is the truth. It's an invasion. But what we can prove for sure is what you all have said about deadly substances killing a plane full of Americans a day, minimum. That's an established fact. We know that for sure. I listened to some of my acquaintances and friends and experts talk about why, Russia was cornered and Putin is backed in a corner and threatened and has no choice with NATO pushing up on his border. And I'm thinking, let me tell you about a border that's been breached. Not a threat of some international body talking about admitting another member state. Talk about a border that's been breached. And Americans are being killed now, today, right now, as we're talking, as anyone's listening, no matter what time you hit play, people are dying.
That's right.
Right now. So if we can understand, not me, I'm anti-war mostly. If we can understand why Putin is leveling buildings, wouldn't that, the same foreign policy experts who say, well, we get it. Would you get if we ran a bunch of tanks across the southern border and started leveling Mexican border towns, leveling all the way down to Colombia? Well, would they understand that? I said we would be more justified in trying to stop the deaths of Americans by hitting certain strategic places. I'm not talking about civilian populations at all. I would never, ever, ever even discuss such a thing. I love the Mexican people. And if ever there's been people victimized by the cartels, it's them.
Amen.
Right. It's to eliminate the cartels would be to protect them first and foremost where they operate. But I mean, I guess all I'm trying to drive home here is we are invaded. I'm a lawyer. In the U.S. Constitution and in the law, the states have greater power to act where there's an invasion that is not being stopped by the federal government, either because it can't or because it won't. And I'm not into a legal discussion exactly, but would you all agree that the circumstances as they are, one, is an invasion, an attack on Americans, and number two, that therefore the states, like Governor Abbott, has the right and the ability to act?
Well, I would answer the question like this. There's many people, more so all the time, that ask the question, why aren't the cartels, why haven't they been designated as terrorist organizations? Why aren't they classified as a national security threat? And then those resources in the United States government used in order to deal with them and bring this under control. So it's a complicated issue. I don't know who can answer that question, but I'll tell you this, from my perspective, being that person that's there with my deputies when we do zip these poor unfortunate souls up in a body bag and then meet with their parents later who are heartbroken, at some point there will be enough Americans die from fentanyl poisonings and drug overdoses in this country where this government will have to act. Okay.
Well, and everyone's wondering where's that line? Like, it feels like it should have been crossed a long time ago. And I'm not taking aim at anybody in particular, sure. But it is definitely also undisputed that when we had a different president, border crossings were way down.
That's right.
And now, so can you all remind me of the numbers under the end of President Trump's tenure versus today?
Oh, they were non-existent almost compared to today. They were spectacularly low. And, I always want to be careful, although I agree with the words, it looks like, feels like an invasion, is that there's a lot of people that come across that border that have been deceived and have been ripped off and abused. And all of a sudden you have them in the crossfire, probably very much like the Ukrainians fleeing Ukraine right now.
That's a great point, Bill.
But I do agree, and I urge whoever has the authority to do it is to declare them, as Jim said, the cartel as a clear, present danger, and they should be labeled a terrorist organization, and then any resource at our behest should be used against them, including going into Mexico and after them.
So I'm glad you clarified that, because I don't view the average Mexican, Guatemalan, Nicaraguan as an invader.
Right.
I really, really, really don't. And living here in Texas has been amazing because when you live in Ohio, where I came from, and there were no immigrants, like for us, it's an abstract question, right? Yeah. It's people in other parts of the country don't live this reality. I moved to Texas, and literally, I had a house I had to fix up. Everybody who came to my house, if it was 20 contractors, they were all from south of the border. A lot of them did not speak English. And you know what? Different from back home in Appalachia, they show up on time, they work hard, they do what they say they're going to do, they don't steal. I've had an amazing experience with the immigrant population in Texas. And if you can't, experiencing is believing. And I've really come to care. Those are the people who came here for a better life.
That's right.
Some people romanticize the people coming across the border just want a better life. Some of them do. And then some people demonize everybody coming across the border. Oh, they're just people to exploit an open border for drug sales and people sales. Yeah, when I was talking earlier about an invasion, I'm talking about what I'm sure are terrorist cells from across the world, our cartels, our criminal enterprises are, I have zero doubt, the Russians would have their own people come in here to do intelligence operations. Why wouldn't they?
Absolutely.
Wide open border. So I'm thinking of a certain type of person who has ill intent for the country in mind when I use the word invasion, and I don't mean everybody. So Okay, this has all been fantastic. Tell me, because there are a lot of people who listen who are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. If you think you have any kind of information that could be helpful to you two in going after these, people who would be part of your interdiction efforts, what do? Do they just call the sheriff's department and report straight into you guys? Or is there someone else that you actually call for like, I suspect that my child has a drug problem. I suspect that there's, fentanyl that could be floating around because these kids are passing around drugs they're synthesizing themselves. I mean, because this is not a problem I'm familiar with.
Well, across North Texas, I mean, it's fair to say we have some of the best police departments in the United States right here in North Texas. They do amazing jobs. So depending on what jurisdiction that you live in, whatever that jurisdiction may be, if you run across one of these issues or you find the pills like I described, for example, the Mexican oxys, these blue pills with an M on one side and 30 on the other, or your child has prescription medication, that they find that they have that they're not supposed to have, contact your local authorities. Those police officers are trained and they'll know what to do, and they'll know how to launch investigation, and they'll know how to talk to these people. This is a clear and present danger. People must talk to your loved ones. And
so what I'm hearing is don't cover it up.
That's
a lot of parents will want to deny it, will want to cover it up, will not want to call the authorities. They don't want their child to get in trouble. You might save your child's life by calling the authorities in this case, right?
Well, again, the biggest thing that they can do is to have that conversation with their kids and make them understand it's not like it used to be.
Yeah.
It's not going to ever be like it used to be.
These are not the drugs they sing about in the war protest songs of the 60s and 70s. This is a completely different ball game than what's been glamorized maybe by popular culture. And they're completely unsuspecting and unaware is what I hear. Okay, I am talking here with two, again, of my favorite people, Sheriff Bill Wayburn from Tarrant County, which is Fort Worth, and Sheriff Jim Skinner up in Collin County, which is Plano, in that area just north of Dallas. And thank you so much for being so generous with your time. I know you are extremely busy people. I feel guilty having you here talking to me instead of being out there saving lives, but hopefully we'll get the message out. You'll get to be on some other shows that are here in the immediate vicinity and push out the word. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you. Thank you for helping us get the word out.
I'm happy to help. Whatever we can do here, always let us know.
Thank you.
You're listening to The Jackie Daly Show.